and thank all of you for joining us today. We're going to take a very high-level look at some insurance concerns from the standpoint of the use of drones in agriculture, especially either when they're used by the farmer or they can be used by a third-party contractor, as Alex was just speaking about. Right, and we see both opportunities being taken and being used by today's agricultural professionals. Now, the other thing we're going to take a look at are some of the potential insurance complications. So, regardless of the party that is using the drone, whether it's the farmer who owns the drone and uses it, or if the farmer has gone to a third-party provider to provide the services to the farmer, we're still going to have some insurance concerns that need to be addressed. And if those aren't done appropriately or properly, as I would say, then we're going to have some potential issues. And the one thing we don't like in the insurance world is issues that are not addressed before the loss occurs, right? So, as Alex said, these are some common uses that we see in agriculture. I'm not going to belabor this point because Alex already addressed these, but these are the primary things that we're seeing them used for now. One quick thing about chemical application, especially when it comes to pesticides, herbicides, fertilizers, etc. You'll probably see them being more used in the future in smaller properties and in pinpoint applications. They're not going to take the place of the standard crop dusting exposure, but rather they're going to be looked at as a complementary exposure to the crop duster. The crop duster will apply large swaths of application, large swaths of herbicides or fertilizers or seeding process, whereas the drone will be able to do in a more localized, more specific area, and that'll be very advantageous to the farmer, especially the larger operations, because it's hard to get around a multi-acreage or hectare property that we oftentimes see. Now, anytime we start talking about drones, we have some concerns. One of the first questions that we received earlier today was a question about privacy. And I thought that question was exactly for me as well. It was for Layla, but it's the same exact thing when we start looking at the regulatory and legal issues that we have concerns with, not just in the U.S., but because we're going to be able to have, again, as Alex said, high-powered cameras and infrared sensors. We could even utilize, and we're seeing some governments starting to look at the use and consider the use of facial recognition technology and license plate readers. Well, when that occurs, privacy becomes the issue. And with privacy comes multifaceted concerns just from the standpoint of the user and the one who gathers that information, as well as the party whose privacy might have been compromised or invaded, if you will. So we look at that in that regard and think, okay, these are some of the things that we've really got to figure out how we're going to manage these. Now, in the U.S., there have been two drone aircraft privacy and transparency acts, one in 2013, and I know that seems like forever ago, that was 7 years ago, but one also in 2017. And both of them addressed some of the same issues, but neither one has passed out of our Congress and been signed by the president. So these are still in the discussion mode, if you will. But because they are in the discussion mode, what these acts looked at addressing were nuisance issues. Is the flying of your drone over my property create a nuisance to me? And if so, might I have the ability to take some legal action against you as the owner or the operator of the drone? What about if it's not a nuisance? Are you trespassing onto my property? Now, that may seem different in different societies, but in the U.S., that is a major concern. And attached to the trespass is if you have trespassed, then you have probably, in all likelihood, to a degree, invaded my privacy. Well, if you've invaded my privacy, is that an actionable legal action that I can take against you or not? Does it raise to the level of harassment or not? We don't know. All these things have not been addressed yet by our legal system, but we know that these are significant legal and regulatory concerns. Finally, data collection and inadvertent eavesdropping. I'm flying over my property, but something going on your property. I think I'll go take a look. Oh my goodness, what can of worms, as we would say, have we now opened? So we look at these concerns, and these are the ones that are not quite frankly, we've yet to address these in a very satisfactory situation. From a loss exposure standpoint, okay, I own a drone or I'm operating a drone. Now, what are my loss concerns? Well, I could have my drone, my UAS, right, collide with the ground, damage my drone. Well, as we saw from Alex's presentation, that might be a few $1,000s, but it's probably not going to bankrupt me. But if I'm flying near where other planes are flying, think commercial aircraft especially, we could have a significant problem. Obviously, that should go without being said, right? Injury to passengers of manned aircraft due to interference by the drone. These are concerns that we see, and we've seen a number of exposures in Newark. We saw it over in Gatwick and other international locations where drones were interfering with the operation of commercial aircraft. This is a huge issue and probably will not be something addressed from an insurance standpoint, but is definitely a significant loss exposure. What if the drone hits someone? All right, just does damage to an individual on the ground? That's a concern. Or damages your own property, right? Or damage to property on which the operations are actually being performed. These are some concerns. The major concerns, again, though, despite all these loss exposures that we're looking at, are quite frankly the privacy issues. Now, most insurance companies, and I can never say all, I don't want to say all, but many insurance companies do not provide coverage for the operations of drones on a policy that has not been endorsed for coverage. Many homeowners policies will provide coverage to the drone owner and operator, but only if they are considered a hobbyist, right? And there's some actual language in the policy. I'm not going to make you insurance experts today on policy language. That'd bore the heck out of you, and I don't want to do that. But suffice it to say that when one owns a drone, if you're owning it and using it only as a hobby, you would have to check with your homeowner's insurer to see if you have coverage both for the drone and or for the actual liability exposures that you would be subject to, right? That is the very limited coverage that you may be able to get. Now, a farmer using a drone to look at their crops and to see the progress of their crops is not considered a hobbyist use, but is considered a commercial use, and as such is subject to the rules and regulations and the laws of the Federal Aviation Administration. So that is another situation that we have to look at. Some of those insurance companies that will actually provide coverage for a bodily injury loss will not necessarily provide coverage for what we call personal injury. Now, I have to get down into the weeds of insurance language here for a minute. In the world of insurance, on the liability side of things, personal injury does not include my hurting your body. Personal injury is those things, as you see on the graphic in front of you, things of the nature of trespass or nuisance or invasion of privacy. So I may be able to have from the insurance company that I am insuring the farmer for, the agricultural operator for, I may be able to endorse their policy with that particular insurance company and provide them with some coverage should the drone do injury to someone else's body, but I very likely will not be able to get them coverage for the personal injury exposures of trespass, nuisance, and invasion of privacy. Now, in the States, we have two primary advisory companies that write the types of insurance coverage forms that most carriers use. That is called the Insurance Services Office. You will often hear them referred to as ISO, and the American Association of Insurance Services, referred to as AAIS. Now, there are other providers of insurance. These are folks who just write coverage forms, and then they are adapted under licensing procedures in the insurance world. So in that respect, those two primary writers of coverage really dominate the landscape of insurance. And primarily, again, they have the ability to provide personal injury coverage, but because the exposure for personal injury is considered too unknown and too immeasurable at this time, most carriers will not write the personal injury coverage. When we insure a drone, right? When we insure a drone, the actual drone itself, I can do under either an aviation hull coverage or under a commercial property via an inland marine policy. That's for the actual drone itself, right? I can get aviation liability coverage for the operation of the drone that will provide coverage for bodily injury or property damage that the drone might do. But again, often that will not include that personal injury. I can get a special drone policy, right, that will provide for some products and legal liability and products liability and physical damage. Or I can even buy on-demand drone coverage, right, where I can use my phone, right, pick it up, turn on the app, start it up, be billed automatically for the length of time that I'm going to be operating my drone, and then I can shut off the insurance when I'm done using it. There are many options in that regard from the standpoint of insuring drones in the U.S. The challenges that we see are this, right? Again, aircraft aviation, this is normally where we find coverage for the hull or the liability exposures. But oftentimes, that will not include the personal injury exposures, types of losses that could be subject to my owner or operator. We have concerns with data breach and cyber as well. Normally, drones are excluded under property coverage, so I would have to endorse it for that. Other concerns is, well, what if my employees are injured by the drone? How will the workers' compensation policy respond? And then finally, is the drone considered covered equipment if it breaks down? And would my equipment breakdown coverage form provide coverage? So that's our high-level discussion, if you will, of things that we see are the concerns when using drones. We know they are going to be used to a greater extent in agriculture than they are today. We know they're going to be used by the farmer, or they're going to be used by the farmer under a third-party contract with another party. And when we look at these insurance complications, we just have to want to make sure that we address these potential exposures to loss so that our farmer, our agricultural operator, does not have to reach into their own pocket to pay these losses.